Myst, Might, Mayhem. By Han Jung-Wheolya. Chapter 276. Holy Fire Priestess. Part 1. The old woman's eyes inside the prison cell widened. From the moment Mok Jaehyun suddenly drew the symbol and started mentioning the first tier, she thought he was on their side. However, that was her misjudgment. Swish. Thud. What? She couldn't hide her astonishment as she watched him suddenly sever Defender-in-Chief Mook Siam's arms with his bare hands while Mook Siam was clasping his hands together in a salute. Mook Siam's severed hands, fallen on the floor, still twitched as if the nerves were alive. Eventually, startled by his severed arms, Defender-in-Chief Mook Siam was about to let out a scream. Thud. Crack. Before the scream could escape, Mok Jaehyun kicked his chin upwards. With the force of the kick, not only did his head jerk upwards, but his upper body also involuntarily lifted, causing his jaw to forcibly close and his teeth to shatter. Ugh. Thud. Not stopping there, Mok Jaehyun struck a palm strike at his lifted abdomen. Boom. Kuhuk. Defender-in-Chief Mook Siam's body, hit in the abdomen, collided with the cave wall. Crash. Mook Siam, half buried in the cave wall, vomited blood profusely. Kuo. Bleg. Because he was hit in the location of his danjian, his true energy was completely disrupted, making him miserable. Mook Siam's eyes, writhing in pain, shook crazily. It seemed his danjian had been shattered. His true energy was rapidly dispersing from his abdomen. Whoosh. For a martial artist, the true death could be said to be the destruction of the danjian. This was because it meant losing the martial arts and internal energy accumulated over a lifetime. Blood vessels bulged in Mook Siam's eyes as his internal energy dispersed. In the moment when not only nausea but also countless complex emotions surged in, Mok Jaehyun grabbed his neck and lifted him up. Grip. Kuo. Ah. The bleeding is quite severe. I should show some consideration for this. Tap 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 tap. Mok Jaehyun pressed the acupuncture points near his severed arms to stop the bleeding. Then, he opened his mouth with a smile. I thought the second-tier executive was the adjutant next to the associate military commissioner, but it seems the imperial palace is quite important. Seeing that there's one more person. What the hell is this bastard? Defender-in-Chief Mook Siam looked at Mok Jaehyun with trembling eyes. He considered himself to have excellent judgment, enough to be considered at the level of the first tier. However, he was deceived in a way that was so absurdly futile. No, he had no choice but to be deceived. In the first place, it was more strange not to be deceived when he listed things that only those at the second tier or higher of the organization would know so confidently. You. Who? Are you? Are you? Really from the Fire Faith? Order? Normally, he would have smirked and said, who knows? However, since the Holy Fire Priestess of the Fire Faith Order was watching inside the prison cell, Mok Jaehyun smiled and answered casually, so you really thought I was one of them? Kuo. Drip drip. Blood flowed back from his stomach, and blood continuously dripped from Mook Siam's mouth. As if not caring about this at all, Mok Jaehyun stared at him intently and then suddenly smeared a drop of his blood on his index finger with the opposite hand. Mook Siam was puzzled, wondering what he was doing. Swish. Swish. Mok Jaehyun then began to carve something on his forehead, throat, and rip. He tore open his chest and started carving near his heart. It was the character for protection. He was forming a talisman using his own blood, imbuing it with curse power. After writing this, Mok Jaehyun sealed the hand seal and muttered, the art of protecting the body from evil curses. The great powerful god of the Northern Dipper, the heavenly dog, the earthly dog, the six ding, the six jia, the commanding gods, the great power of the morning sun, the true Qian and Kuan. As he chanted the incantation for the protective technique, Mook Siam, feeling an ominous sensation, tried to shake off Mok Jaehyun's hand. However, as his danjian was destroyed and his true energy was rapidly weakening, it was impossible for him to do so. Grip. Ku. Rather, Mok Jian'an tightened his grip on his neck, making it hard for him to breathe. Mok Jian'an, who had been chanting the incantation while sealing the hand seal, stopped. Then, this time. Swish. He suddenly brought his finger to Mook Siam's mouth. Then. Pluck. Ugh. He pulled out one of Mook Siam's upper front teeth. Mook Siam, who had one tooth pulled out, couldn't understand what this man was doing. However, Mok Jian'an didn't stop there after pulling out the tooth. Pluck. He pulled out another of Mook Siam's teeth. He kept pulling out not just one, but eventually pulled out 6 teeth. As a result, with all his front teeth pulled out, Mook Siam's appearance, bleeding profusely from the empty spots, became pitiful to look at. Swish swish swish. Mok Jian'an carved letters on the pulled-out teeth. They were the names of the 6 Jia gods. After carving the names of the 6 Jia gods, the 6 Jia gods, the Yin gods, the guardian gods, the successful completion, the golden prohibition of the 3 purities, the imperial decree of the Jade Emperor, the swift response. He chanted the corpse untying mantra 7 times, inhaled 7 breaths, and scattered it to the east. Then, he took off Mook Siam's shoes and threw one 3 steps to the east and the other 3 steps to the west. What the hell is he doing? Even the old woman inside the prison cell couldn't understand Mok Jian'an's actions. Then, Mok Jian'an smiled as if he had finished and said to Mook Siam, "Now the preparations are done." "What are you doing?" Nothing much. I'm just taking some precautions against the restriction placed on you." At Mok Jian'an's words, Mook Siam showed an expression of incomprehension. What does he mean by restriction? Restrictions were originally imposed on those belonging to the 5th tier in the 3 realms. Even though they were middle-level executives, those who received the title of executive at the 2nd tier had no memory of receiving such restrictions or being forced to do so. Then, Mok Jian'an said, "It seems you don't even know that you've been restricted. What are you talking about? Even the adjutant you mentioned died from here." Tap tap. Mok Jian'an tapped his head with his finger and said, "His head exploded when he mentioned the one you serve. Don't say nonsense. We have never been subjected to such restrictions. Then, as a test, try talking about the one you serve." "What? You said you've never been restricted. So tell me what you call the one you serve." At Mok Jian'an's words, Mook Siam closed his mouth. That was because everything related to that person and everything associated with him must not be divulged. It was an absolute rule that must be followed in the organization. However, as Mok Jian'an kept making disturbing remarks about restrictions, it became even more difficult for him to open his mouth. "What are you talking about?" "Stab." Before he could finish his sentence, Mok Jian'an's finger dug into his eye socket. As a result, Mook Siam turned pale and couldn't move. "This crazy bastard." To him, Mok Jian'an said, "I don't have time, so if you don't answer, I'll pull out one of your eyeballs like this. You've never seen your own eyeball before, right?" With those words, he smiled brightly. Shiver. At that sight, Mook Siam felt a chill run down his spine. By looking into a person's eyes, one could determine whether they would really do something or not. Mok Jian'an's eyes showed a gaze that would carry out that action without a moment's hesitation. So, Mook Siam spoke in a trembling voice. If what you say is true, and I'll die from the restriction the moment I divulge it, do you think I can speak?" "Don't worry. That's why I placed a talisman on your body to block the curse power and created a corpse to substitute you using the corpse untying technique." "Corpse?" "Yes. So feel free to talk. Of course, if you don't want to talk, you can just keep your mouth shut. But after I count to 3, I'll pull out this eyeball of yours. And after counting to 3 again, the other eye. And next, I'll twist and tear off your nose. Well, I'm too lazy to mention what's next, so imagine it yourself." Defender-in-Chief Mook Siam couldn't say a word with a stiff face. In this situation, anyone who wasn't prepared to die would have no choice but to open their mouth. That's how terrifying Mok Jae-un's every word and action was. Under this pressure, Defender-in-Chief Mook Siem finally opened his mouth. If I just tell you what we call him, will that be enough? If you answer a few more questions, I'll guarantee your life at least. Mook Siem fell into a momentary dilemma. Even if he was worse than dog shit, would it be better to at least save his life since this world was better than the afterlife? Swish. Then, his eyes fell on his severed arms and destroyed Danjian. Even if he survived, he would be no different from being dead. Sigh. Moreover, the organization would surely kill him to silence him anyway, as he had become useless as a martial artist. In the end, Mook Siem decided to keep his loyalty to the organization. Just kill. I'll restore your severed arms and Danjian as well. What? How can that be? If you can't believe it, I can't help it, but I'm just letting you know it's possible. However, the longer you delay, the less likely it will be restored, so it's better to hurry. At Mok Jae-un's words, Mook Siem, who had been determined to keep his loyalty, changed his mind. I'll talk. That's a good choice. Mok Jae-un had instantly read what kind of mindset he had by looking at how he stared at his arms and his determined eyes. Now, speak. Alright. We call him the third. Splat. Right at that moment, the shoe placed 3 steps to the east exploded with a splat. What is this? Mook Siem couldn't hide his surprise. On the other hand, the corners of Mok Jae-un's mouth slightly rose as he watched this. As expected, his prediction was correct. In sorcery, a curse could only be lifted if the target paid a price. So, Mok Jae-un had created a fake corpse of Mook Siem using the corpse untying technique to deceive the curse. Of course, it looked like a simple shoe, but magically, it was his corpse. Just because it was a corpse didn't mean it could escape the curse. Swish. Mok Jae-un held out his hand, gesturing for Mook Siem to continue speaking. Then, Mook Siem, who had flinched at the exploded shoe, swallowed dry saliva and continued, we call him Mok Gon, the third eye. Splat. As soon as he finished speaking, the shoe placed 3 steps to the west exploded. Seeing this, Mook Siem let out a sigh of relief with trembling eyes. Phew. Was there really a restriction or something in place? He didn't know if it was this man's ploy, but the moment he spoke the name of that person, he felt his whole body tremble and the blood in his head surge in reverse, so it seemed to have been really dangerous. Splat. At that moment, Mook Siem's head exploded. Mok Jae-un, who had been holding his exploded head, wiped the bloody flesh with his sleeve and muttered. It failed. He thought he had succeeded in deceiving and diverting the curse power. However, the curse was so strong that this man's head couldn't endure it and eventually exploded. He had considered it a clever trick, but the curse power of the one who placed the restriction was much higher than his own. Seeing that even the corpse untying technique, which deceived death, couldn't ultimately avoid the curse, it seemed the sorcery had reached a truly high level. How annoying. Mok Jae-un clicked his tongue inwardly. If he could overcome the curse, he thought he could extract more information, but it turned out to be regrettable. Of course, even so, he had clearly found out one thing. It was that their leader was called the third Mok Gon. The third Mok Gon. Why did they call him that? Literally translated, it meant opposing the third sight. It was difficult to understand what this meant. However, it seemed there was no time to speculate on this meaning now. Thud, thud. Mok Jae-un turned his steps and approached the prison cell, saying, You've waited a long time. I wanted to find out more, but as you can see, they are in no condition to answer. So I hope you, the Holy Fire Priestess, can tell me. Why are these people after you and that treasure you mentioned? At Mok Jae-un's words, the old woman, no, the Holy Fire Priestess opened her mouth. You. I'm not sure if you're really a follower of our order. Why do you say that? The doctrine of our order is to revere the holy fire, practice good, and eliminate evil. And? At that question, the holy fire priestess pointed at Mok Jayangan with her finger and spoke in a cold voice, "But no matter how I look at you, you are evil itself." Chapter 277. Holy Fire Priestess. Part 2. The doctrine of our order is to revere the sacred fire, practice good, and eliminate evil. But no matter how I look at you, you are evil itself. Along with those words, the holy fire priestess inside the prison cell looked at him coldly. To the old woman, Mok Jayangan smirked and said, "I can be evil, I guess." You guess? For the followers of our sect, constantly practicing good and staying away from evil is a trial and something that sustains oneself. Put aside those old-fashioned words and tell me who determines the standards of good and evil. What? At Mok Jayangan's words, the holy fire priestess's eyes narrowed. Who determines the standards of good and evil? It was an absurd question. Why are you asking a question that is moral and taken for granted? Can't you even distinguish between right and wrong? Who defines what is right and wrong? Huh? Are you trying to have a word battle with me now? It's more that I find it amusing how you take things for granted. Finding it amusing to take things for granted? Yes. After all, aren't the standards of right and wrong, good and evil, set by someone? What? In the end, it's people who set those so-called standards, isn't it? The holy fire priestess couldn't deny this. In the first place, the standards were ultimately set by the people of the past, and they were passed down and became customs and morality. The same goes for the doctrine of the fire faith order. They follow what was passed down from the Parsa kingdom. However, if one argues about the fundamentals like this, there will be no end to it. What are you trying to say? Are you denying that someone set the standards? But do you think you can deny them? Why do you say that? There are things that the majority considers right and things that the minority considers right. And the world ultimately moves towards what the majority considers right, and even what is considered wrong in terms of morality will eventually lean towards the will of the majority. So you're saying that good and evil, right and wrong, are opinions set by the majority, and those belonging to the minority should follow them? That answer cannot be given by me. In the end, it's a matter that you have to accept for yourself. However, until the majority makes that decision, there must have been a lot of contemplation, conflicts, and trial and error. Ah, I see. The holy fire priestess believed that even in teachings, enlightenment ultimately comes from accepting it for oneself. There was no point in discussing fundamentals all day long and trying to instill this and that if one didn't accept it for oneself. To her, Mok Jayangan said with a smile, "Then, the fire faith order is an absolute evil and an absolutely wrong thing that shouldn't exist in the world." What? What are you? You said it yourself. The reason why the minority should follow the opinion of the majority. That's the fire faith order and its doctrine, which are rejected by the majority of the people in the Central Plains, belong to the minority, so they should naturally be denied, shouldn't they? At Mok Jayangan's words, the holy fire priestess couldn't give any answer. Rather, she had been countered. She had tried to educate him by teaching him the doctrine due to the evil she felt from him, but instead, she had only exposed the weakness in her own words. A cunning fellow. If she raised a counter-argument for the sake of her order here, it would only lead to a repetitive debate where she would have to contradict her own words. The holy fire priestess clicked her tongue and said, "It's been a while since I've been entangled in words like this." Is that so? But thanks to that, it has become clearer. Clearer? What is it? I can no longer be certain that you, who have doubts about the teachings of our sect, are truly one of us. The holy fire priestess's eyes were filled with suspicion. Seeing her like that, Mok Jayangan thought he should stimulate her appropriately. He had many things he wanted to find out from her, but there wasn't enough time now, and if he made her more suspicious, it might become troublesome to help her escape. Ah. It seems I haven't been able to gain your trust, holy fire priestess. Then how about this? Mok Jayangan took something out from his bosom. It was none other than... That is? What Mok Jiangyun took out was the ring given to him by Shadow Clan Master Huan Yixian. He had said that this was a token that proved one's identity as a follower of the sect. After showing the token, Mok Jiangyun clasped his hands together in a respectful manner, bowed his waist, and paid his respects. A follower of the Fire Faith Order pays his respects to the Holy Fire Priestess. At Mok Jiangyun's greeting, the Holy Fire Priestess, whose mind had been filled with suspicion just a moment ago, became confused. How did he get this? That was because the ring Mok Jiangyun showed was a token that only the high-ranking position of bishops in the Fire Faith Order could possess. Even within the Fire Faith Order, there weren't many bishops. So she asked, "Who did you receive this from?" Judging by his appearance, he couldn't be older than his prime, so it couldn't be his own. Therefore, she was convinced that Mok Jiangyun must have received this token from someone. "I received it from my master." "Your master? Tell me his esteemed name or sect name." Shadow Clan Master Huan Yixian had told him to omit his surname when introducing himself to a fellow sect member. He said that this surname was inherited from the previous generation's Shadow Clan Master. So Mok Jiangyun said, "It's Yixian. Bishop Yixian." At those words, the Holy Fire Priestess's voice became excited for the first time. Mok Jiangyun observed this intently. He had predicted that Shadow Clan Master Huan Yixian would be a quite high-ranking figure in the Fire Faith Order, but seeing the Holy Fire Priestess, who was second only to the society leader, show this reaction, it seemed he was indeed a very important person. Sent by Bishop Yixian? Where is he now? Do you know an organization called the Heaven and Earth Society? The Heaven and Earth Society? Isn't it one of the largest organizations in the martial arts world? How could I not know about it? Then, are you saying that Bishop Yixian was still there? Thanks to her reaction, Mok Jiangyun learned that Shadow Clan Master Huan Yixian had been in the Heaven and Earth Society for much longer than he had expected. Then, she said, "I can't believe Bishop Yixian is still alive and using his power to help us like this. It's truly a blessing for our order." At these words, Mok Jiangyun's eyes became strange. Was it really true that the Holy Fire Priestess could foresee the future? If she had such an ability, she would have predicted the information she was curious about, such as the life and death of the Shadow Clan Master, but it was incomprehensible. Just as this doubt was about to intensify, rumble rumble rumble. Suddenly, a tremor was felt from the ground, and the entire cave suddenly shook. The scale of the shaking was incomparable to when Mok Jiangyun and the 9 blood cult's blood Saint Dam Bekha were fighting. Whoa! It was so severe that the Holy Fire Priestess staggered and grasped the iron bars. What is this? Mok Jiangyun placed his hand on the ground, puzzled. Then, the intense shaking of the entire cave quickly subsided. He couldn't understand what this phenomenon was. As he was puzzled, the Holy Fire Priestess said, "For now, let's get out of here. If we don't leave quickly, we'll be in trouble." Do you know why? Not exactly. It's just that this is the first time the entire cave has shaken so violently. You said it's the first time, but does that mean it has shaken before, even if not severely? At Mok Jiangyun's question, the Holy Fire Priestess recalled something. Although not to this extent, whenever it shook even a little as if an earthquake had occurred, the embroidered uniform guards who came here would hurry out. Ah. Not all of them. Come to think of it, among those who interrogated me, only the one who said he was the overall head of the underground prison didn't leave and closed the door inside the cell. Even when this place shook? That's right. Pointing to this tremor, that person told me to remember. He said it was absolutely impossible for me to escape the eternal hell prison alive. Impossible? Mok Jiangyun stroked his chin at those words. From his experience, escaping eternal hell prison didn't seem impossible to that extent. Well, it felt meaningless to say that anyone who entered here couldn't escape. Then, could there be something else hidden? Mok Jiangyun removed his hand from the ground and said, "For now, let's go out. Let's see if it's really impossible or not, as you said. Bishop Yixian is always cautious, but you seem to have more confidence than you appear." I prefer to face things head-on rather than worry. More importantly, would you mind stepping back a little? Step back? It's hard to cut the iron bars if you're leaning against them. Ah. At Mok Jayangun's words, the holy fire priestess took about 5 steps back. Then, Mok Jayangun grasped his sword fingers and lightly slashed at the iron bars. Swish! The holy fire priestess couldn't hide her puzzlement when he slashed the iron bars with his bare hands instead of using that dead man's sword. Could the iron bars really be cut just by slashing with fingers? Clang! At that moment, the iron bars that Mok Jayangun's sword fingers had brushed past were cut and fell over. Seeing this, the holy fire priestess swallowed dry saliva and licked her lips. Although he seemed to be not even in his prime, she was inwardly amazed that he was a master skilled enough to cut iron bars with his bare hands. Bishop Yacian's disciple is indeed outstanding in martial prowess. She wondered if Bishop Yacian was also this skilled. After removing all the restraints on her arms and legs, the holy fire priestess was able to come out of the prison cell. I'm not completely out yet, but thank you. She expressed her gratitude to Mok Jayangun. In response, Mok Jayangun lightly shrugged his shoulders. Right at that moment. Rumble, rumble, rumble. Once again, the entire cave shook violently as if an earthquake had occurred in the underground prison. But this time, it was even more severe than before. To what extent? The cave walls cracked, and a strange pressure was felt along with the shaking. With this, Mok Jayangun, who had his hand on the ground, frowned. Is this why? Rumble, rumble, rumble. The holy fire priestess staggered and grasped the cave wall, asking, what is happening? In response to her question, Mok Jayangun answered in a dumbfounded tone, it seems the ground below has completely collapsed, and the ground we are on is also falling. This shaking and pressure, which made it difficult to stand properly, were caused by that. Mok Jayangun clicked his tongue at the situation he was experiencing for the first time. Although it was called Eternal Hell Prison, he never expected that it would make the ground of one floor collapse and fall. Rumble, rumble, rumble. Oh no. At the passage leading from Eternal Hell Prison to the 3rd floor of the underground prison, 6 Office's Commander Im Gyul, the head of the 4th office, couldn't hide his despair as he looked at the collapsed area. He didn't expect that the final mechanism trap would actually be triggered. Damn it. 6 Office's Commander Im Gyul couldn't hold back and shouted loudly in anger. So many prisoners had escaped from their cells that he had hurried here in case the final mechanism trap would be triggered, but it was already over. Rumble, rumble, rumble. The pressure that made it difficult to even stand up was a phenomenon where the ground below had collapsed, and the entire level of Eternal Hell Prison was falling. As far as he knew, it would fall for about 1 ri, approximate 0.5 kilometers. As this place fell, the collapsed and emptied ground would be immediately filled, making it absolutely impossible to go back up. Crunch. He should have just not come down at all. If it weren't for the pressure from Defender-in-Chief Muxium, this situation wouldn't have happened in the first place. Grinding his teeth in frustration, Im Gyul finally came to his senses. There's no time for this. If he stayed still, he would eventually die. Now that the final mechanism trap had been triggered, the only way to survive, even a little, was for everyone to join forces. Prisoners, embroidered uniform guards, it didn't matter who, as long as one person lent a hand to dig upwards, that was the only answer. Moreover, the final mechanism trap wasn't the end of it. According to the information he had received about the underground prison, once they fell to the bottom, hidden prison cells would open, and 36 bronze humanoid entities inside would be released to indiscriminately attack those who had escaped. Tap, 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 tap. With this, Im Gyul hurriedly ran towards the inner part of Eternal Hell Prison. If they want to live, they'll cooperate obediently. Mok Jayangun said to the 9 Blood Cult's 6th Blood Saint Dam Bekha with a surprised tone, "Oh ho. You're able to subdue him alive?" Mok Jayangun had inwardly expected that Zhu Wenhyang, who was entranced by the demonic sword plundering killing sword, would lose his life while fighting against Dam Bekha. But perhaps he had heavenly luck? Although his complexion was somewhat haggard, Zhu Wenhyang was lying in front of Dam Bekha, who was leaning against the wall, peacefully asleep after fainting. And on the floor beside him, the plundering killing sword was half buried. True to its nature as a demonic sword, even though it was stuck in the ground, it faintly trembled and exuded a demonic aura. Aside from saving this brat or not, what are you going to do now? What do you mean? Don't tell me you're asking because you don't know. If we had just left with only you and me earlier, this wouldn't have happened, right? The reason Dam Bekha was angry was simple. It was because she had also sensed that the ground had fallen below. We're trapped here and about to dig our graves just to save that young old woman. Young old woman? At Dam Bekha's words, the holy fire priestess frowned. Who was this woman to call her a young old woman? In the first place, attaching the word young to old woman was an oxymoron. However, since the situation was so dire, she thought the words had slipped out in anger. At that moment, Mok Jianan approached the plundering killing sword that was stuck in the ground. Dam Bekha tried to stop him. Hey! Stop right there. Yes? I finally got that thing off this brat, and now you're going to grab it and do what? It was quite annoying to subdue even a relatively weak fellow. If a guy who had exceeded the limits were to be captured by the demonic nature of the sword, even if only by chance, something terrible would happen. Out of this concern, she was warning him not to grab it. Then, Mok Jianan shrugged his shoulders and said, "It's a waste to just leave it behind." A waste to leave it behind? Are you saying that now? In a situation where we don't even know if we can dig our way up, even if our nails break. What are you doing now? Dam Bekha looked at Mok Jianan with an incomprehensible gaze. That was because Mok Jianan suddenly took something out of his bosom, placed it between his index and middle fingers, and abruptly rotated his hand in a circular motion. She wondered what he was doing in this situation. Swish, 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 swish. At that moment, smoke flowed out from the air, and space rippled, creating an entrance. Seeing this, everyone couldn't hide their astonishment. What kind of sorcery was this? Chapter 278. Holy Fire Priestess. Part 3. Embroidered Uniform Guard Associate Military Commissioner Sangik Seo looked at someone with a slightly tense expression. In front of him stood a middle-aged man with a strong impression and only a mustache, paying his respects. Although he was clearly in a higher position, the pressure he exuded as one of the top 5 masters in the Imperial Palace was no ordinary matter. He was none other than Hyun Soon, the Northern Pacification Commissioner, one of the 2 pacification commissioners who could be considered the pinnacle among the Embroidered Uniform Guard's field officers. He seems to be getting stronger. Sangik Seo had watched his growth since he joined the Embroidered Uniform Guards. He had already surpassed him in strength long ago, but now he was incomparable. It wasn't for nothing that he had become one of the top masters in the Imperial Palace. Murmur, murmur. The area behind Northern Pacification Commissioner Hyun Soon was chaotic. A crowd of people wearing embroidered uniform guard attire kept gathering, including lesser banners of junior 7th rank, chief banners of senior 7th rank, probationary 100 men commanders of junior 6th rank, 100 men commanders of senior 6th rank, deputy 1,000 men commanders of junior 5th rank, 1,000 men commanders of senior 5th rank, 6 offices commanders of junior 4th rank, and pacification commissioners of senior 4th rank. The reason they had gathered here was singular. It was an emergency summons. From the Associate Military Commissioner and above, they gained the authority to mobilize the embroidered uniform guards in an emergency summons. Here, mobilization didn't mean the complete entirety of the force. Even if it was called mobilization, it excluded the Southern Pacification Commissioner who closely guarded His Majesty the Emperor, the first office that guarded the inner palace and the imperial family, and the 4th office that was in charge of the prisons. However, these 6th office bastards. Most of the embroidered uniform guards had gathered, but only those from the Deputy 1,000 men commander and below had come from the 6th office. The 6 offices commander of the 6th office, So Yeren, and the 1,000 men commander Ma Are Hyan did not come. Crunch. Now that this guy has escaped from the poison, is he refusing the emergency summons? No, wait. Is he planning to stab me in the back along with 6 offices Commander Soyerin? If that was the case, it would become very troublesome. Although he had escaped the poison thanks to Defender-in-Chief Mook Siem, who was from the same organization as the deceased embroidered uniform guard 100 men Commander Jiam Chong, he still had the weakness of the human skin mask. If an investigation were to be conducted with that, his position would be in jeopardy. Damn it. So he informed Defender-in-Chief Mook Siem about being caught with this weakness. Then, Defender-in-Chief Mook Siem said, "I will take care of the human skin mask." So, Associate Military Commissioner, pretend to be the Chief Eunuch Ho of the Western Depot and catch that person. Catch that person, you say? But even Jiam Chung was no match for him, so how? I'm not telling you to catch him alone. Don't tell me. Issue an emergency summons for the embroidered uniform guards. If we can deploy at least half of the embroidered uniform guards' forces, we can catch him without difficulty. That may be true, but we have sufficient justification. Since there is suspicion that the person close to Prince Jiang is an imposter, no one will question or object to the emergency summons. For this reason, Associate Military Commissioner Sang-ik Seo had issued the emergency summons. However, now that the masked 1,000-men Commander Ma Ra Hyen, who held his weakness, did not come, he hesitated on what to do. It had to be one of two things. Either they had read his moves and were trying to backstab him, or Defender-in-Chief Mook Siem was in the process of taking away his weakness from them, as he had boldly claimed. If that was the case, we must hurry. In any case, both they and he had no choice but to make diversionary moves. Trusting Defender-in-Chief Mook Siem and catching that fake Chief Eunuch Ho was the only way to resolve everything. Associate Military Commissioner Sang-ik Seo looked at the gathered embroidered uniform guards. Nearly 60% of those in the Imperial Palace had gathered. In terms of military strength, this was sufficient. If they pressured that person with Northern Pacification Commissioner Hyun Soon at the forefront, they could sufficiently subdue him, no, kill him. Thud. Associate Military Commissioner Sang-ik Seo raised his hand and spoke in a loud voice. It seems we don't have the luxury to wait for the leaders of the 6th offices. From now on, we will go to Prince Jiang's icy palace to save His Highness. Like that, the embroidered uniform guard forces led by Associate Military Commissioner Sang-ik Seo were heading towards Prince Jiang's palace. Originally, it was forbidden for a military group exceeding the designated number to enter the palace of the imperial family, but if it served the purpose of rescuing the imperial family, it was exceptionally allowed. That was also why Defender-in-Chief Mook Siem had proposed this. Before long, they had almost reached the vicinity of Icy Palace. They just needed to pass the palace hall. We must kill him without fail. There was no need for subduing him. Since they couldn't let him speak, as it would be dangerous, he had to issue an order to execute him. Associate Military Commissioner Sang-ik Seo was about to give the order. But right at that moment. Rumble, rumble, rumble. WH what? The ground? The ground shook, and an earthquake occurred. Startled by this, the embroidered uniform guard forces stopped moving towards Icy Palace. The sudden earthquake occurred throughout the entire Imperial Palace, causing roof tiles to fall, and it was utter chaos everywhere. What the hell is this? It was already frustrating that they had to hurry, but the earthquake made it even more difficult. While wondering what was going on, red smoke was seen rising from somewhere. The red smoke made the embroidered uniform guards more agitated than the earthquake. That was because the red smoke signified that a major incident had occurred in the underground prison, and it was a red signal requesting assistance accordingly. With this, the 6 offices commanders approached and said, "Elder Associate Commissioner, what should we do about this? Shouldn't we also send forces to the underground prison by dividing the personnel?" That's right. The red signal means there was an escape attempt in the underground prison. At the opinions of these 6 offices commanders, Associate Military Commissioner Sang-ik Seo's stomach churned. No, this is driving me crazy. The goal is right in front of us. To catch that guy, he needed all the current forces. With only half, it was extremely unsettling. However, he couldn't ignore the red signal from the underground prison either. Just as he was agonizing over what to do, Elder Associate Military Commissioner, Pacification Commissioner, look over there. At that moment, 1,000-man commander from the third office raised his hand and pointed towards Icy Palace. Wondering what was going on, he turned his head and saw Prince Jiang standing on the roof of Icy Palace. It's His Highness Prince Jiang. Why is His Highness on the roof? The embroidered uniform guards couldn't hide their perplexity at Prince Jiang's sudden action. Associate Military Commissioner Sangik Seo was no exception. His head was already messed up, and now that Prince Jiang was on the roof in a precarious state, it felt like his head was about to explode. We must save His Highness. At that moment, Northern Pacification Commissioner Hyun Soon tried to step forward. They were right in front of the Icy Palace Hall, so they couldn't ignore the danger to the Imperial family member. However, just as Northern Pacification Commissioner Hyun Soon was about to take a step forward, the embroidered uniform guards are driving this king to his death. Swish! Prince Jiang suddenly shouted those words and jumped off the roof. Oh no! Thud! In an instant, Northern Pacification Commissioner Hyun Soon used his lightness skill to the fullest to catch him somehow. However, no matter how skilled he was and how outstanding his lightness skill was, there was a distance to catch him. Thud! He missed him by just 5 steps. Prince Jiang, who had fallen headfirst, had his neck twisted grotesquely and collapsed. Blood flowed from Prince Jiang's twisted body, dyeing the surrounding ground red. Shocked by the sudden action followed by a sudden, no, the worst situation, Northern Pacification Commissioner Hyun Soon and the embroidered uniform guards were at a loss for words. The one who was most speechless among them was Associate Military Commissioner Sangik Seo of the embroidered uniform guards. Damn it. He had come to catch the fake supervisor of the Western Depot, but the situation had spiraled out of control. The justification for issuing the emergency summons was to save Prince Jiang, a member of the imperial family. But he had died. Moreover, as he jumped, he said that the embroidered uniform guards had driven him to his death. Sangik Seo sat down on the ground as if he had fallen into despair. Flinch! Swish! At that moment, Northern Pacification Commissioner Hyun Soon, who had been examining the body of the deceased Prince Jiang, half drew the sword from the scabbard at his waist and looked around. Northern Pacification Commissioner Hyun Soon, surveying the surroundings like that, couldn't understand. Just a moment ago, he had felt something eerie from Prince Jiang. But it had disappeared in an instant. What was that just now? There was a spirit body in the air watching him, who was puzzled like this. She was none other than Chang Ryong, clicking her tongue while holding a long pipe. Not bad. After absorbing the demonic energy of the golden nine-tailed fox, one of the 6 demons' kings, her spiritual energy had become almost indigo-level spirit. So even if it was someone who had surpassed the limits, she thought they wouldn't easily detect her spiritual energy, but he noticed it in an instant. If her spiritual energy hadn't evolved further, she might have been discovered. Chang Ryong flew upward. I did as that mortal brat told me to, but I wonder if this alone will be enough to divert attention. Around the same time, in one of the Imperial Palace's food storage warehouses, about 50 jang away from the entrance to the underground prison. This place, which stored dried seafood and such, had a particularly strong smell, so it had unusually low traffic unless one came to get food ingredients. Rumble, 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 rumble. Due to the earthquake shaking the entire warehouse, someone got up from their spot and slightly opened the warehouse door. Creak. And through the gap, they couldn't hide their astonishment at the red smoke they saw. That was the red signal indicating that a major incident had occurred in the underground prison. When that smoke signal appeared, regardless of the reason, all the embroidered uniform guards, except for the first office, had to be dispatched, just like in an emergency summons. Thud. Someone hurriedly closed the warehouse door. He was none other than the masked thousand-man commander Ma-Are-Hyan. Ma-Are-Hyan was dumbfounded. Didn't they say they would quietly help them escape? The situation had become extremely complicated. If the red signal had been raised, it was as good as confirming the fact that there was an escape from the underground prison. Ma-Are-Hyan walked to one side of the warehouse, frowning deeply at the seriousness of the situation. It was no exaggeration to say that escape had become nearly impossible. How the hell are they going to come here? He had urgently searched and found a safe base for the escape because he was told to prepare one. But it seemed that everything was about to be ruined. The situation had become difficult. In this case, should he go to the underground prison for now, in response to the red signal? Just as he was contemplating what to do, thud. At that moment, without sensing any presence, the warehouse door suddenly opened. The startled thousand-man commander Ma-Are-Hyan hurriedly hid his body between the stacked wooden crates in the warehouse. Then, the opened warehouse door closed again. Who is it? Ma-Are-Hyan suppressed his presence to the maximum. Judging from the fact that he couldn't feel the presence of the person who entered, they were clearly a tremendous master. But then, he heard a sound as if something was being dragged. Ha! Ha! The breathing was uneven. It was the breathing of someone who had been injured. At that moment, a voice was heard. Thousand-man commander Ma-Are-Hyan. At that voice, Ma-Are-Hyan couldn't hide his inner perplexity. The owner of the voice was none other than his master, no, his superior, the leader of the 6th office, 6 office's commander So-Yeren. Ma-Are-Hyan's eyes slightly trembled. Why did she come to this place where he was? While he was puzzled, 6 office's commander So-Yeren said. What the hell were you doing to be tracked by someone like this? Tracked? What does that mean? Wondering about it, he had no choice but to come out from between the dried seafood crates. In front of So-Yeren, who had her arms crossed, a person who seemed to be injured, with bruises on his face, was lying face down. Judging by his attire, he was a low-ranking eunuch of the Eastern Depot. Was she saying that person had secretly followed him? If he could hide his presence to that extent, he had to be either a trained person or a master one level above him. However, based on his breathing and energy, he wasn't a master one level above him. At that moment, 6 office's commander So-Yeren, who had her arms crossed, spoke. Thousand-men commander Ma. What the hell are you doing? An emergency summons was issued by the Associate Military Commissioner of the Embroidered Uniform Guards. So I went to get you and accidentally discovered this person following you. What are you hiding from me? At her words filled with suspicion, Ma-Are-Hyan was at a loss. The reason he had come here was to help a prisoner from the underground prison escape. Therefore, he couldn't reveal this fact. Tap tap tap. 6 office's commander So-Yeren approached him with a cold expression. Although she trusted Ma-Are-Hyan, who was her deputy and almost like her disciple, taking such secretive actions without informing her of anything was an act of betraying that trust. Feeling the disappointment from her, Ma-Are-Hyan hesitated on what to do. If you don't tell the truth. Before she could finish her sentence. Swish swish swish. At that moment, the space right next to them rippled, and suddenly, smoke rose, creating a round entrance. At the sudden bizarre phenomenon, the heads of 6 offices commander So-Yeren and thousand-men commander Ma-Are-Hyan simultaneously turned towards it. The eyes of the 2 people who turned widened. What the hell was this? Why did such an entrance suddenly appear in the warehouse? As 6 offices commander So-Yeren was puzzled by this incomprehensible phenomenon, her expression hardened. It was because of the people she saw beyond the entrance. Prisoners? Although she had never been assigned to the 4th office and had never entered the underground prison, as an embroidered uniform guard, she was familiar with the prisoners' attire. 2 of them were wearing prisoners' uniforms, and the one unconscious over there was Ju Wenhyang? Trainee Ju Wenhyang. And the one holding something strange between his index and middle fingers at the entrance was trainee An Jong-hu. Seeing these 2, she could instinctively be certain. Although it was hard to believe, this mysterious entrance made of smoke seemed to be connected to the Imperial Palace's underground prison. Because she knew that both of them had entered as apprentices of the Fourth Office, which was in charge of the prison this time. At that moment, trainee Jong-hoo, who was standing in front of the entrance, alternately looked at Ma Are-hyen and So Yeren and spoke, "Did Thousand Men Commander Ma bring that person?" The moment he heard the transmitted sound ringing in his ears, Ma Are-hyen realized that trainee Jong-hoo was Mok Jae-eun. Because of this, Ma Are-hyen's mind became complicated for a moment. Not only did he change his face again, but was this what he meant when he said he could escape from the underground prison? Right then. Swish! Six Office's commander So Yeren drew her sword from the scabbard at her waist, aimed it at Mok Jae-eun, who had the face of trainee Jong-hoo, and said, "What the hell are you doing right now?" At her words, Mok Jae-eun looked at Ma Are-hyen's reaction and let out a soft sigh. Judging by his vigilant appearance, it seemed he hadn't intentionally brought her. Having this woman involved was somewhat annoying, but there was no choice. They had to cross the entrance first. This treasure he was holding between his fingers was something he had received from Yeo Surin, the disciple of Scarlet-Tailed Old Immortal, the master of Harmonious Immortal Pavilion, one of the two most mysterious pavilions among the 64 pavilions of diviners. This treasure, which he had won in a bet, was a useful item that created a door to a desired location within a radius of about 200 jang, but only once. However, while it was very useful, it was a one-time use. So they had to quickly cross to the other side before it closed. Swish swish swish. Seeing the entrance gradually becoming unstable, it seemed they had to hurry. With this, Mok Jae-eun pulled out the demonic sword Plundering Killing Sword, which was stuck in front of the entrance, and gestured towards the Holy Fire Priestess and the Nine Blood Cult's Sixth Blood Saint Dam Bekha behind him, saying, "For now, let's hurry and cross before the door closes." Of course, he altered his voice. Six Office's commander So Yeren thought he had died after being ambushed while injured at the medicine house. There was no point in letting her know he was alive. However, whoosh 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 whoosh. At that moment, the demonic energy of the Plundering Killing Sword surged, trying to erode Mok Jae-eun. Mok Jae-eun's eyebrows raised at the demonic energy, which was much stronger than expected. To this extent, it was far more severe than the evil commandment sword. Because of this, Mok Jae-eun had no choice but to draw upon his demonic energy to avoid being eroded by the sword's demonic energy and suppress it. However, the moment he drew upon his demonic energy, clang! A sword flew at him like lightning, and Mok Jae-eun hurriedly pulled out the Plundering Killing Sword to block it. The one who had swung the sword was none other than Six Office's commander So Yeren. So Yeren spoke with a stiffened face. "You were alive?" Her energy perception was very sensitive, so she accurately remembered the energy she had experienced before. For her, revealing a unique energy like demonic energy was no different from revealing his own identity. At her words, Mok Jae-eun scratched his head as if he was in a predicament. "Ah, I unintentionally got caught." "How did you?" "More importantly, I don't have time, so I think you should step aside." Boom. With those words, Mok Jae-eun infused demonic energy into the Plundering Killing Sword, creating a repulsive force, and flung Six Office's commander So Yeren away along with her sword. Swish 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 swish. Pushed back about 6 steps by the sudden strong repulsive force, her eyes wavered. This guy. His martial power has increased. It wasn't just a matter of increasing. It had been enhanced to an incomparable extent compared to when she had fought him. Not only was the person she thought had died actually alive, but what the hell had happened in just a few days?